Thanks for watching the Abundant Life Family Podcast. I'm Bill.
And I'm Jen.
We're the Hildebrands. We're helping to build families that last. Today we have Matt and Jocelyn Kepner here with us as we talk about the heart of fostering and adopting. Matt, Jocelyn, so good to have you guys with us today, and look forward to hearing more about foster and adopt. But first, let me remind you, the first time I met you anyway, my memory is at a foster picnic. And at that foster picnic, I remember seeing this guy walking through the pavilion with all of these fishing poles over his shoulder and a trail of kids following him as you went down to the lake and helped them to learn how to fish. And that was pretty awesome.
It's very
That
sweet.
was my first memory of you.
Yeah.
And every time I've seen you since then, you're doing something. You're working, you're serving, you're putting in some time somewhere. But let's first find out a little bit about you, and then Jocelyn will find out as well some of your experience in fostering. Yeah. But why are you so passionate about fostering? How did this start in your life?
So growing up, I was alone most of my life. I was struggling with houses and bouncing from house to house when I was about 11 years old. And then that didn't get any better until about 15. And at 15, I ended up in a Christian boys' home. That's kind of where I met the people that would help influence my decision to accept Christ. But it was also a place where I didn't have any family. I didn't have anyone that really loved me or cared for me. It was, you do some work and then you read the Bible, and that was it.
So not necessarily a well-balanced experience with coming to know Christ, but just expectations coming to know Christ. Now you're expected to do this.
Yeah.
No relationship and discipleship. Okay. Those are important.
It is. So, I mean, that went on for a while, and I got out of the boys' home. And
how old were you when
I got out?
Yeah.
I was about 15, 3/4, almost 16.
Okay.
So I was there a very short time.
Okay.
They asked me to leave very politely, and I was asked to leave.
With no place to go.
With no other place to go. And then after that, I tried to go back to my mother's house. Now I have issues with my stepfather at this time. I was what I would consider to be abusive. And nothing had been resolved. There was no forgiveness, no grace, no nothing. And then we actually got into another scuffle at that time, and I was asked to leave my mother's house again. So after the boys' home, I was 16, bouncing houses again, up until about 18, 19, and I met my wife during that time. Yeah. We ended up getting married when I was 20 and she was 19. And I had already had a kid at 18. So I was aware that, kids were a very big deal. And, but I wasn't in contact and I didn't have ways. And when we got together, we talked about having kids, and she talked about foster, and I was completely against foster because of my upbringing. I said, I don't even know if I could be a dad. How can I raise other people's kids? And that was something I really wrestled with. And we ended up going to church together, and we were praying about it. And I was completely against it. I was so against foster. And she was 21, and she was like, we should just go take the class. Let's go see more information about foster. So she turned 21, and within 2 weeks, I think we were in a class. And we got in there, and it broke my heart knowing that there were, at that time, 2,000 kids in Jackson County alone that had nowhere to go. And there was only 200 foster homes.
Now, Jackson County is the county Kansas City sits in.
Yeah.
How many?
There was, at that time, roughly 2,000 kids without a home.
Wow.
Whether foster home or whether biological home, kinship home.
Okay.
And there was, at that time, there was only like 200 foster families that were taking in kids.
And so that would be at least 10 kids each.
Yeah. Which the state kind of frowns
if they
upon.
could do. Wow. And so you guys start this journey together and you're doing fostering, but you're still not finding your purpose. You're still kind of empty and you're struggling to figure things out.
Yeah. So we started, and we decided that we needed to continue going to church because we knew that God needed to be centered. And that was the only way that we were going to be able to raise kids and keep our marriage together, is if we put God center. So we were attending a different church because we had just moved up here, just got licensed as foster parents, and we were trying to get plugged in. We were trying to serve everywhere that we could. And we didn't click anywhere. You know, we were fairly newly married and we were fairly newly licensed, just had a kid, and we just got a foster kid at this time. And people our age were just single, getting out of school, and
newly engaged.
Newly engaged, and they weren't on our path. So we felt like the outcast everywhere we went. And we ended up leaving that church, and we fell out of church for a while. We had 5 kids at that time, and we were just broken. We didn't know which path to really go down. We wanted more, but we just didn't know how to achieve that.
Now, you said the word outcast. You felt like an outcast, and I feel like that's kind of a summary word for your whole life at this point. I mean, you felt like you're on the outside looking in, and you're not accepted. You're not accepted at home in your home family. You went to a boys' home. You were asked to leave, and you attend a church that doesn't seem to be the place that you fit in either. And so you're struggling. You're looking for purpose, and you even look for it more in having more of these kids. If I understand your story right, you eventually left this church. It's not helping me. I'm not growing there. We're not finding community, family, support in raising these kids. We don't know what we're doing. We need help, but nobody in the church is helping us. And so you turned away from that. But somewhere along the lines, you shortly heard about abundant life.
Yeah, it was when our last boy, I was pregnant with our last boy, and he was just a newborn. And we just had a moment of, no, we can't do this without God in the middle of this. And we can't just walk away. We can't just give up. And so he was 2 weeks old when we ended up coming to Abundant Life. And it was just kind of a God moment. We had 3 different churches we wanted to try that said, hey, had other foster families in the church. And so we were on our way to one of the other churches, and something in my spirit just went, nope, we need to go to Abundant Life. And from the moment that we pulled in the parking lot, the street to seat people met us there. They got us checked in with kids ministry. And having foster kids, you have some harder kids that have some struggles and some trauma. And they were super gracious and super kind. And they loved on our kids so well that it impacted us. And then hearing Pastor Phil from a place of vulnerability and accountability, and just seeing the intentionality that Abundant Life does things with, just rocked our world from day one. And we're like, this is where we want to be. This feels like home more than anywhere we've ever been. And then we just kind of spiraled from there, got into next steps, got into membership, and wanted to find community. And so went through that process, and in the process of that got to hear Pastor Chad share the gospel in such a clear way, just with the little drawing of the gospel bridge. But for us, it was a light bulb moment. And it really just made it so clear of this is what we've been missing. This is what we need in our life. And so from there, it was really easy for us to go, this is why we foster, is because God has called us to, because God has given us this commission that we are supposed to care for the widows and the orphans. And this is how we do it in modern day society, is through the foster system. And and so we've been in abundant life ever since.
So what I'm hearing is you're looking for purpose, looking for, why am I here? Why am I on the earth? And you're not finding it in anything. I mean, you're not finding it in family. You're not finding it in fostering, even in marriage. But yet now it all clicks. It's explained in an incredible way. And so this journey, you're finding community now, and you're finding that Jesus is my purpose, but I can fulfill my purpose through fostering. So you continue down the road. You didn't just drop the kids that you had.
No, we continued. Yeah.
Carload of kids that you already had coming in. And
I don't think we've even mentioned, how many kids have you guys fostered now?
In 7 years, we fostered 29 kids.
29.
Yeah.
It's more than a carload.
It's more than a carload.
Busload.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thanks.
Yes.
You used to have a bus, by the way. But
Yes, we used to have a bus.
for all those kids.
Oh my goodness.
So somebody that's listening and they've been thinking, I'm interested in fostering. What do I need to do? What's my first step? What would you suggest the first step is? A relationship with Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So getting that lined out and having that first step, what are some other things that people might need to consider?
I would say they need to consider just their family dynamic. Taking in foster kids is very rewarding, but it is also very stressful. You need to make sure that you're in a good spot with Jesus. You need to make sure you have a support system.
I think that's so key as I'm sitting here hearing this story, that Matt, I think it's so powerful, and Jocelyn, that is like the first thing that you recognize. Like, you had to figure out as a family, like, if we're going to do this and we're going to survive, you yourself, you Jocelyn, you Matt, had to get settled in your own heart and get things aligned with the Lord before you could really begin fostering well. And that is incredible and so powerful. And maybe that may be the step maybe a lot of families miss, is
definitely
being sure they're centered and aligned with the Lord before they begin the process. So good.
Yeah.
Wow.
It'll definitely break you down if not, because you need to be able to have that reliance on the Lord, because you can have, even having all the support and all the community around you is great. But if you don't have that relationship with the Lord to lean on when times get really hard, then you won't make it. And so there's a lot of foster families that experience hardships and their families don't last because they didn't have a strong foundation.
Wow. Okay. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that was good. Some of the people listening to this may be thinking, I'm not real familiar with fostering. Can you explain a little more about what is foster care and how do kids get into that?
Yeah. So kids typically come into care because of abuse or neglect, and the severity of that just depends on the system and the state's rules. So that's how kids come into care. But the idea of foster care is that kids are reunified with family, that kids have a safe place to go. So they're placed with a foster family, while mom, dad, family members, whoever, works a state plan to do better. So if there's been drug concerns, then maybe it's therapy and drug rehab. Maybe it's counseling or whatever that looks like. So they have a plan that they have to work, and the kids have a safe place to live, and then a safe place to also start processing through some of their trauma. And so I would say kind of the role of foster parents, that gets overlooked is, yes, our job is to care for the kids, but it's also to support the family. And so if your heart is to foster and to take care of kids, that means your heart is to support these families and to reunify these families, because that is the number one goal. It doesn't always end up that way, but that is the goal of foster care, is to put families back together.
So you could have a kid for just a few days, weeks, or you could have them for several years.
Yes. Yeah.
And then they're reunified, but that's the goal.
Yes, definitely.
That's good.
Yeah.
What are some of the age range of kids that are placed in foster care?
So they kind of range from birth, as soon as the child comes out, all the way up to 18, just depending on the situation.
In the circumstances, yeah.
And,
And as a foster parent, you get a little bit of control over the age range and the gender and the trauma history and all of that. And you can say, I'm willing to accept kiddos between these things. But they're really particular about, you can't just foster a baby. You can't sign up to say, hey, we want to foster 0 to 2. Because while that's great, there's lots of kids, but the average age of kids in care is 12. And so we need foster parents that are willing to take on the older kids. And they all come with trauma, whether they're newborns or they're 18, they all come with trauma. Being removed from your family is traumatic.
Yeah.
Can you foster if you have your own biological kids?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
It actually, in our family dynamic, it has been so beneficial for these foster kids to come in and see these biological kids already have a pattern, a certain way that they behave. And then the foster kids can kind of help mimic that to a degree. But they also have someone to play with.
Yeah.
Even if they're 6 years apart, the foster kid is going to relate better to the child in the home than they would the parents.
Yeah. And I think, just to add to that it's such a cool thing to see we call them permanent kids, because we also have adopted kids in our home. It's cool to see our permanent kids be so kind and so gracious, and it teaches them compassion and thankfulness on a level that you can't get from anywhere else, because they see these kids come in. And it's also really cool to see the dynamic of, I have kids that were in foster care that are now adopted and my children permanently, and they get to minister to the kids that come in from foster care in a whole different way of, hey, listen, I was where you were at. This isn't the end of the world, and there is hope beyond this.
Are there different types of foster care?
Yes. So there's a good variety of different ways to foster, but the two main ways are foster and foster only. So the goal of reunification. But there are families who sign up to foster to adopt only. And so kids that have come in to care that for whatever reason, reunification is not an option. There's no family members available to take them. And so these kids are either legally free for adoption, or they are in the process of needing an adoptive resource. And so there are families that specifically sign up to foster to adopt. But those cases, again, are more few and far between, because the goal of foster care is to reunify families.
Are there any main considerations that a family should make when they're considering fostering?
You like I said before, you want to make sure you have a support system. You want to make sure your family is on board. And if they're not,
by your family, do you mean like your husband and wife? Do you mean your husband and wife and kids, or extended family, or all of the above?
All the above.
Okay.
So before we take in a new placement, we always talk to our kids and say, hey, this is what we want to do. We want to take this kid in. We're going to pray about it, but what are your thoughts? And we always ask them their thoughts, and usually they're on board.
What are the ages of your kids that you're presenting this to right now?
So we bring it up to our 5-year-old or 6-year-old, and our 9-year-old and 15-year-old.
Okay.
Basically all the ones that can speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your 2-year-old.
No,
Not so much.
Yeah.
not so much. And because it's important for our 5 and 6-year-old to be in on that conversation as well.
Love that.
Yeah.
So we bring it up to them. We talk about it. We make sure that we're on board. And it's important to understand how your extended family feels about it.
Yeah.
Because not all of your extended family is going to want the extra kids. You know, I think about Christmas time. You know, everyone wants to buy Christmas presents. Well, last year we had 5 kids and now we have 7. So there's 2 extra people that we got to buy Christmas presents for.
Yeah.
So extended family is not always on board. So you have to think about things like that.
Okay. Now, I know that when you go through the process of becoming licensed, they'll have a lot of questions that help prepare you anyway. But are there any other considerations you can think of to just kind of throw out there?
I think just make sure that your why behind it is
Very good.
don't come at it from a point of, oh, I want to rescue kids, because God is in control of all of it. And so if your heart is to rescue kids, then that's probably not a good enough reason to foster. You should foster because it's what God has called you to, and because you want to stand in the gap and help preserve families, not to save them from their parents, because God did design families to be together. And no matter what our opinions and our feelings are towards that, God designed families to be families.
Yeah.
And everyone can be given grace and forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you go in with the idea, I'm going to rescue, it doesn't, that rescue, what you think is being rescued, it may be very different from what God had planned for that child.
Exactly.
And so it has to be a purposeful calling. I hadn't thought of that. That's so good. Yeah.
So if I was to ask you of a challenge, that you guys have faced, I know one of those is you have 9 people in your family. How do you get 9 people to where you need to go legally? You can't just throw them in the back of your truck. You have a pickup truck.
We take 2 cars everywhere we go.
Yeah.
It's
You
a challenge.
just make accommodations as necessary. So we have 1 vehicle that will fit 1 adult and all of the kids in the car. Otherwise, like you said, in the past, we've had a bus. Prior to COVID, we had a bus that we would drive around with all of our kids in it. And
That's cool.
you just make accommodations as you need, and the Lord provides. And not every foster family is going to have 7 children or 9 children or whatever. But if that's what the Lord's called you to, then He provides.
That's right.
You just have to be willing to say yes, and He makes it all work.
Yeah. Have there been any other challenges that come to mind anyway?
Besides just the physical challenges of you have to manage appointments and calendars and schedules, it's managing the heart aspect of it, because there's a lot of good in foster. There's a lot of great things, a lot of great relationships, but there's also a lot of hard. And so making sure that you are keeping yourself and your family healthy through it, and not becoming worn down to secondhand trauma, and just being willing to take a step back and admit when you need help, and but also loving the kids the way that you would want your own kids to be loved.
Very good.
So speaking of help,
Yes.
what are some ways that, like I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I need to be supporting, I need to be helping. I haven't been called to foster. So what can I do, or what can our listeners and viewers do to help families like yours?
Yeah. Well, so at Abundant Life, we've partnered with Promise Serves and have something called care communities. And so care communities provide tangible acts of service to foster and adoptive families. And they give, some of them do weekly meals, some of them help fold laundry, some of them provide babysitting or transportation. It's just a team of people who say, listen, we weren't called to serve, we weren't called to foster, but we are called to serve. And everyone can do something for kids in care. And so they step up and they fill in that gap, and they really become community for these families. And so care communities is not just an Abundant Life thing, it's nationwide, partnered with all kinds of churches. But even if there's not a care community in wherever that people are listening from, they can get partnered with their local state agencies. And there's always ways to get involved through foster closets and blessing boxes and all kinds of different things.
Oh my goodness.
Very good. As we close, I want to pass on one thing to you, Matt. I've been in youth ministry a lot of years, and you have had a difficult background, your growing up years, and you were scared to be a dad with good reason.
Yeah.
You didn't see a lot of great examples. But I want to say this, what I see in you and have seen in you for the last year and a half has been amazing. God has done some awesome things in helping you to take steps to be an awesome dad. And you're doing a great job of it. Both of you do a great job.
Thank you.
Great job of fostering, great job with your own kids. You're awesome. So I appreciate you being on with us today. Can I close in a word of prayer?
That'd be great.
All right. So Lord, thank you so much for just being with us as we walk our own journeys of life, that you don't leave us to do it alone. And I know Matt shared with me earlier that looking back on his life, he now sees your fingerprints all through his life, even when he felt like you were so far away. So God, I thank you that you do walk the journey of life with us. Yes. So help us to walk the journey of life with those who need that help, whether it's fostering or coming alongside a family who's already foster parenting. Yes. But Lord, help us to serve. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Abundant Life Family Podcast. If you found this helpful for your family, hit like and subscribe below. And feel free to drop a comment or question below. To learn more about the Abundant Life Family Ministry and the 10-mile markers to help you win at building families that last, go to our website at livingproof.co/family.